Welcome to NFL Daily, where we always catch our two-point conversions. I'm Gregg Rosenthal, sticking the knife in and feeling bad about it in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio. Next to my friend Patrick Claybon, who's dancing through the pain, and my other friend Nick Shook, who wishes he could feel the pain of a difficult playoff loss as a Browns fan. Gents, how are we doing?
Christ.
Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me.
Well, we all deal with it in different ways. It was a spectacular game. There's a reason that these things mean so much, and to get out there and see some of the best in the world, I'll go out there. It's always good. And with Jim and Tony on the call, it was great.
No, stop.
I'll turn the volume on.
Yeah, Shook. You're a AFC North guy. Are you like rooting against your rival Ravens, or are you rooting for your friend Patrick here in this situation?
No, I was. Well, first off, I don't feel anything. So
okay,
talking about the pain of a playoff loss, I don't feel anything. But no, I was on the Ravens bandwagon. I was on the train. I had them by 10 points in this game. I just didn't foresee them turning the ball over 3 times.
Okay, so you don't like our producer Eric, who is trying to not celebrate. He's making quotes like he's on the team. Well, it's like the next one's the one that really matters. This is just a small step.
It's true.
Sure.
What am I celebrating?
Enjoy it. Kobe Roberts over there. Job's not done.
What is
not.
this? You're not the one having
sorry.
a press conference. They've lost in this round 3 straight years until this one.
Mahomes and the Chiefs are looming, guys. Bigger problems on the horizon.
Thank you for leading me to what I should have started the show with. The Bills won this game against the Ravens, and we have our conference championship games set. Starting in the NFC, the Commanders will be headed to Philadelphia. That game at 3 p.m. Eastern next week. The Eagles sweated it out. As you guys know, if you're listening, we'll talk about that game in a little while. And yes, the AFC Championship game, all season long, it felt like it was leading to either Ravens-Chiefs or Bills-Chiefs. And we found out in Orchard Park on Sunday that it was going to be Eric's Bills. Let's go there.
Jackson lines up in the shotgun, looks to his left, brings Likely in motion, takes the snap, back to pass, plenty of time again, looking. Jackson now rolling to his right, still looking
so much
down
time.
The field, fires deep for the end zone, it is caught, a diving catch in the end zone by Likely. Isaiah Likely skidding across the end zone, hauls it in, and with 1:33 to go, it's a 2-point game. A 24-yard touchdown to Likely, and now the Ravens have a chance to tie.
Play clock down to 5. Here's the snap. Jackson rolling right, looking to toss it, and dropping the football. Incomplete is Mark Andrews. It wasn't a well-thrown ball at all. It was behind Andrews, and he could not come up with it. Falling away from the pass, it's incomplete. Wow.
Yes, that was the key sequence late in Sunday evening's Bills-Ravens AFC Divisional round, 27-25. I personally disagree with Chris Brown there on WGR. The pass was fine. Andrew stumbled a little bit, dropped his third pass of the game. A nightmare performance for one of the all-time great Ravens. Also had a lost fumble. We'll talk about all that. There was also Ryan Radke on Westwood One. They asked Lamar Jackson to make a touchdown drive with the season on the line, and like he's done, Patrick, for so much of the season, he delivered, got them into the end zone. Maybe Sean McDermott was right not to have any faith in his defense and kick that field goal to go up 8. Because Lamar delivered. He was getting time. They're winning up front, but they don't hit the 2, and that is how the season ends for your Ravens.
Yeah, it's the story of the season for Baltimore that started with a drive like that in Kansas City, and that's what these Ravens have done consistently. They've scored that touchdown. They lose the game in Pittsburgh on a bobbled 2-point conversion where the guards are running into each other. This game, there's some snap malfeasance on a play that leads to a fumble, but this is the moment that everybody's gonna remember. Ryan Radke says it's a bad pass. I guess he wants Lamar to fire that thing to the sideline in 19 degrees standard temperature. I don't even know what the wind chill was like at that point in the game. That would have been tough for Mark Andrews to deal with. The ball was where it was supposed to be, but it's not round. Sometimes it bounces away. It did for Mark Andrews a couple of times here, but that's what this offense has been able to do. We saw them in the 2 drives before that run the ball every single play, have success there. Here they drop back and throw. I was thinking of Nick Shook when the Bills decided to rush 3 on that Isaiah Likely pass, where it's like, well, yeah, let's just give Lamar 17 seconds to find an open receiver, and he does that and he comes through. But I think the reason that they're rushing 3 is because the offense was having so much success in every capacity of the game. You just got to throw at the wall and see what sticks. And ultimately, the Ravens just didn't make the plays, and the Bills did.
Yes, and I sometimes get on coaches for not having a feel of their team, a feel of the game in the moment. And in the moment, I feel like I was one of the few people who wanted McDermott to go for it when it was on the 3-yard line, down up 5 with under 4 minutes to go, and instead they kicked the Tyler Bass field goal. And I thought it was a total lack of faith in his defense. But when you look at how the game ended, maybe as a defensive coach, he should have had a lack of faith in his defense, the way the Ravens were moving the ball. Don't forget, there 4 drives in the second half, field goal early where they did make a good play at the end, but then touchdown. They stopped the drive with the Mark Andrews fumble, but the Ravens were moving it. And then, of course, they finished with the touchdown. So maybe he was right not to have faith in his defense. Shook, did you think that was the right decision at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to make it an 8-point game and force the other team to try to convert a 2-point conversion if they get down there and score, because they'd already failed at doing it once earlier in this game. You give your best percentages and best likelihood that you're going to win the game, or at least tie it and send it to overtime by kicking that field goal.
For what it's worth, the models probably had it as about a 50-50, maybe a slight lean to go. For me, it's more just like you have Josh Allen on your team, so let's try to win the game multiple ways, one of which would be with your best player. But ultimately, obviously, it worked out, and I'm wrong.
That also speaks to the Ravens' play calling decisions on their 2-point conversion attempts, because on a drive in which they run the ball down Buffalo's throat the entire way down there, they go to call the 2, and I go, please don't throw the ball. And what do? They drop back and throw the ball, and it gets tipped to the line of scrimmage, incomplete. Same situation there. They score, and I'm like, please don't throw the ball. Use one of your multiple runners and the many ways that you can attack on the ground and try to win it that way with your bread and butter. They roll out right. They force themselves into a third of the field and 1 throw. And that's what happens. It comes down to 1 throw, and you lose the game that way.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game because I don't think there are these massive takeaways that everyone's going to be hammering afterwards, unless you just want to go stupid with the Lamar legacy talk. Now, Lamar Jackson did not play his best game. I think the first half and his struggles and the interception that he threw, and certainly the fumble, and more than anything, I think the sack inside the 10-yard line was a bad play by him, really contributed directly to them falling in a hole that they couldn't get out of, and that they lost. Even though they had 7.3 yards per play, they outgained the Bills by 140 yards, 416 to 273. His struggles contributed, but so many things contributed to it, Patrick, and I can't just get past the most basic thing of all, which is they turned the ball over 3 times and the Bills didn't. So they win a game where Josh Allen was sort of a supporting character, and their running game overall was really strong, and those were 2 important differences. But it kind of does come back to 3 turnovers in a game where these 2 teams had 7 or 8 possessions. That is almost impossible to overcome. And they almost did it, but they didn't.
Yeah, according to Next Gen Stats, they lost 36.7% in win probability on those 3 plays. And so the Bills, they had a conservative game plan. Josh Allen only attempted 4 passes that were longer than 10 yards. But
wow.
When you have a defense that made plays like they did today, because on that Lamar interception, Matt Milano gets pressure. Lamar has to get rid of the ball earlier than he wants. Can't get the ball to Shad the way that he wants to, and Rapp makes a good play. There was Matt Milano tipping that ball in the 2-point conversion where, Stanley can't see where Lamar is. If he finishes the block on Matt Milano, then that's an easy 2-point conversion, and maybe they're still playing the game while we're having this discussion. But it's when a team executes so well, like they did in the run game in that one drive, it's just we expect to see them duplicate that over and over again, all 11 guys. And when one or two guys don't, it just goes hilariously and horribly wrong for the Ravens.
No, I mean, it's tough because, like you said, they outgained them. Like, they were moving the ball well. And I hate to boil it down to the turnover situation, but it literally comes down to that. It comes down to the Mark Andrews fumble on a drive in which they had all the momentum going in their favor. I mean, they were moving the ball really well at that point, too. That was the drive that they were supposed to finish off and really make this an interesting game. And instead, they put themselves in a hole where they then have to go down the field and score that touchdown and try to get the two just to have a chance at overtime. Like, self-inflicted wounds. I basically described this entire game in, like, one sentence, which is the Bills are celebrating a victory that they know they got away with one, kind of, to get to the AFC Championship game, which is often the playoffs in a nutshell. And the Ravens are going to fly back to Baltimore just kicking themselves for all the missed opportunities and the opportunities that they wasted.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you got to give Terrell Bernard credit on the forced fumble in the fourth quarter on Mark Andrews. Now, Andrews made a weird cut. Let's actually listen to that play.
Henry to the right of Jackson in the shotgun. Play clock down to 5 on 2nd and 11. Here's the snap, fakes the handoff, back to pass, has time, looking deep over the middle, wide open is Andrews. Gets away from the tackle, but the ball is out, and Terrell Bernard forces the fumble and scoops up the football. Takeaway number 3 for Buffalo.
Yeah, just such a big play in that game, especially after Andrews' drop earlier in the half killed another drive. He starts going backwards, which you just don't want your tight end to do here. And that is kind of the matchup when these two teams face off. On defense, the Bills are lighter, and they did a good job stopping the run for the most part in the first half, Patrick, but they kind of need to create some big plays and change things up. And this is where I am going to give Sean McDermott some credit. He used to be a coach that would just run what he runs. And he's changed that where he's become much more of a game plan type of guy. I would still say they lean more towards a run what they run type of defense. But in the first half of this game, they were blitzing and playing man at a higher rate than they had in any game in 3 years. Now, it didn't work the whole game, and they started getting run over in the second half. But you look at the numbers. Against zone defense, Lamar went 10 for 11 with 2 touchdowns for 122 yards. And against man, he was 8 for 14, 132 yards against the blitz and man coverage. And they mixed enough up to get a few extra stops and some big plays against the best offense in the league. And in a playoff game, like, that ended up being enough.
Yeah, and that's enough. It doesn't have to necessarily work the whole game.
Yeah.
These games come down to so few possessions, even conversion attempts, right, where you don't need to have the plan work the entire game. You force Baltimore to adjust, which they eventually did, but they were never going to get that time back from those first half drives. It's just not coming back. And when Buffalo had the opportunities, they just took advantage of it. And I know it's very easy to say you don't turn the ball over and you win, but you still need Bernard to poke that ball out. You still need Damar Hamlin to grab Lamar's ankle and Vaughn to pick up the fumble. Like, you still need Buffalo to make those plays, and they ultimately did.
Since you just mentioned it, let's listen to that turnover. I'm sorry. This is like going through a house of horrors for you, Patrick.
It's fine.
You're a professional.
Here's the snap. Oh, it almost went over his head. Jackson has it, but he's wrapped up around the ankles, and he fumbled the football. It's scooped up by Von Miller, coming the other way, 30, and he's tackled at the 23-yard line by Justice Hill. Damar Hamlin forced the fumble.
What a moment there for Damar Hamlin in a huge game, just another capper on what's been a great season for him.
And the TV angle doesn't do that snap justice. It's not that the snap was high. The snap was to Lamar's extended left hand, almost as though if he were standing a full person over, and it was high, and it was coming fast. And so that started the playoff down a bad road. But those are the margins. Like, those are the margins in these games. But, to the chagrin of Mark Andrews, everybody's only going to remember that one last play, but that's not how things work. It's a cumulative football game, Shook.
There's also another margin that I think we might overlook in the whole sequence of everything, and it's that last drive right before halftime in which the Ravens appear to get a third down stop, and then there's a late flag thrown for a pass interference penalty on a play that could have gone either way. Keon Coleman kind of shoved the defender down, but
I thought that was a bad call.
It was a bad call, and that sets up a touchdown.
That was a more important call and less questionable than any one I saw all weekend, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, and it produced a touchdown that gave them a 21-10 lead right before halftime and forced Baltimore to really try to race back into it. And to their credit, they almost did. If Andrews doesn't fumble on that drive, they probably go down there and score and take the lead. We can play the what-if game all day. But these little breaks, these little shifts in playoff games end up mattering so much between two teams that are so evenly matched that it doesn't, everybody's going to remember the 2-point conversion and the drop, right? But it doesn't just come down to that. It's just that happened to be the last play in the sequence of the entire game.
Right.
And when we talk about the defensive pass interference call, none of us are saying, "Oh, the Bills won because of that." That's not what we're saying. Me personally, I am invested in these games, especially this one, and the outcome. And we have the benefit of high definition cameras and replay. We have an opportunity to get these calls right and allow the players on the field to determine the outcome of the game. And until we prioritize getting the calls right, people are going to feel cheated in these situations.
Do you want to bring back replay for pass interference?
I would like to actually try it this time, Greg.
Yeah.
Because
instead of it being a disaster.
Yeah. Instead of it's like, oh yeah, we're looking at this. Oh yeah, we have to have literally all of the evidence in the world and still not overturn it. I would like a legitimate attempt to try to get the calls right. That's all. And it shouldn't take 20 minutes. We sit here and spend all Sunday watching these games anyway. Let's try to get them right.
Right. And one of the things, and many of the listeners didn't love it, they're thinking I'm like a company man defending what happened in the Chiefs game yesterday. But my greater point was mistakes are going to happen because these are humans.
Yes.
And they're going to continue to happen. So you can decide how you want to operate as a fan. You can get really frustrated. There's no conspiracy to help the Chiefs. There is a league-wide push to help quarterbacks, and Patrick Mahomes certainly takes advantage of that in the way that he plays.
There was a call number 8 did not get here on Sunday, January 19th, 2020.
Yeah, that was another missed call. I thought there was I thought was the worst officiated game of the weekend for what it's worth. I thought there was a holding call against the Bills that killed the drive.
Fix the bad ones. That's all I want.
That was bad early. What was that on Dawkins? The late hit on Lamar seemed pretty obvious in this game. And my point isn't that like you can't be mad at bad calls. Just like that, it is part of the game. And what Patrick is proposing is to try to reduce that being part of the game to review. I'm not so against it, but I don't think there's a lot of support for that. I do think they'll start reviewing some plays like face mask, and they'll add a little more to that. Let's talk about some of the good things that the Bills did in this game in the first half, because it was a very strange game. Like I said, only 7 drives for the Bills, and you get 27 points on the board. So even though they didn't have many yards in this game, and they had some penalty yards, and it's 273 yards, they actually did play pretty efficient offense. And I'm thinking, it was a lot of short fields. And then I look at it, and really it was just that one short field after the interception that Lamar threw that they took advantage for the touchdown. Otherwise, like they moved the ball well, and they scored 27 points on only 7 drives. That's a good job by them. Shook, we talked about their running game all year, and if I had to just pick one other thing that stood out to me in this game about the Bills, other than the turnovers, it was that they are now built for games like this. They just won a game, whereas Patrick mentioned, Josh Allen only threw the ball past the line of scrimmage 10 yards 4 times. He only threw for 127 yards in this game, averaged under 6 yards per attempt, and he didn't run the ball that well. But what did it for them on offense was a 58% success rate with James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis. And that is very different, I think, than the teams that the Bills were losing with the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good way to counter a team that had a 55.4% success rate in the Ravens offensively. That's how you match it right there, is with the running game. But it goes all the way back to last season, when the Bills ran the table to get into the playoffs after they changed offensive coordinators. And a massive tip of the cap is due once again to Joe Brady for balancing out this offense, emphasizing the run, and then within the flow of the game, calling the plays at the right times, going forward at the right times, taking the risks at the right times, and knowing this is the situation in which we try to impose our will on you on the ground. And we don't just use James Cook. We use Ray Davis. We use Ty Johnson. We use Josh Allen a little bit. Once they got inside the red zone today, that's why a part of the reason why I was a little bit surprised they didn't go for it in that final possession possession before the Ravens' final drive at the end of the game, is just because they had been winning and succeeding up front in those situations in the red zone on the ground. It makes them a very tough team to play against. Even when they only have 7 possessions, when they have that type of balance, you never really know what is coming, and they're really hard to bring down. And there was a few situations there, especially in the second half, where they're gashing them. They're getting big gains. They're just winning with James Cook being patient, or James Cook getting through the line and breaking a tackle, and very hard to go down. And that makes them a tough team to play against.
Yeah, you bring up that drive after the Andrews fumble. Allen hits Mac Hollins. I like that they started out with the pass on that drive. And then after that, it's short passes to Coleman and Johnson, and it's them able to run the ball with Cook. And they get down to the 2-yard line. It's 3rd and 2, and you think they're just gonna go QB sneak there, the Josh Allen tush push type of play, and instead he's in shotgun, and it's a quarterback run, and those have been effective for them. He didn't have a ton of yards in this game, but they were effective for him. But he gets held up. And for a second, he's held up and he looks backwards.
He sure did.
And I just want to know, Eric, were you clocking that in the moment, and what was going through your mind at that moment?
I yelled, he's going to lateral it. Chris is sitting there watching with me because you see him shuttle it. I got a phone call from my brother watching at his home. He knows I'm at work. He called me moments later. He's like, did you see his hands? Yeah, dude, he was totally thinking about lateraling it. Cook was standing there, and Cook kind of gave a little hezzy, and there was 8 arms on him.
Yeah, and all 8 were owned by Matabwike.
But he totally was.
It
was nuts.
It is funny, and
He's an octopus.
I don't want to get caught trapped in what the conversation could be or wouldn't be, but it's Matabwike ultimately helped the Bills out there, because if we had a Josh Allen throws a bad fumble there in the moment, I don't know if I could have lived with the narrative after that. I know they still would have been up 5 at that point, but it just would have been a preposterous add to that game.
In Josh's defense,
Yes.
if you go back and look at it,
Okay.
it's Cook, Mac Hollins, and Keon, and there's just Tre'Davious White over there. If he rolls that thing to James Cook, he probably walks into the end zone.
That would be another fun way to end the game too. Then that it actually works. That would have been fun. But if he's got Matabwike's arm just grabbing him as he's doing it, who knows?
Well, there's a little pucker there, guys.
And also, the referees could blow the whistle when somebody is being dragged down by 5 people and nobody's going anywhere. They do have the option to stop the play.
Yes, and they did not. So they were fired up after the game. I love what Josh Allen said about Lamar Jackson, about just the respect that he had for him. They had a nice embrace at midfield. Let's actually listen to Sean McDermott after the game, a little spicier than I would have expected.
Well, our guys heard it all. They heard it all week long. We're not good. We're not big enough. We're not strong enough. Not talented enough. Not fat. Whatever it is, they heard it. I don't do the social media things, but I think most of those guys do.
Yeah, Josh did this too in the post game.
Where were these people, Nick? Did you hear them?
They're not fat enough.
No. In fact, when he said it, when Josh said on the field afterward, I said, "Oh, shut up! We don't need this narrative. You're a good football team. There are not a ton of doubters."
This is just how it goes. The Chiefs do it. This is Novak Djokovic is over there in Australia. He refuses to do post-match interviews right now because one guy made a joke about not liking him, and it's these great players and coaches apparently they need to find enemies.
No, they'll do it. Sean McDermott needs to ingratiate himself to the people in Buffalo who call for his job when they don't have postseason success. So saying this maybe does that. It maybe makes him a little bit safer. I think it's a solid play.
I feel like he should be absolutely safe. Although you're right, if they had lost this game, who knows? People would not be happy with him. Like I said, I'm impressed how they have mixed it up in terms of being able to run the ball and in terms of the defensive approach. They didn't have much of a pass rush. We'll get into that next week, talking about the Chiefs, because I do think that's a problem for them that maybe he recognized when deciding to kick that 3, that their 4-man pass rush just isn't great, and that's why they needed to blitz today. But ultimately, they do force the mistakes, and Lamar Jackson spoke about that after the game.
First half, I had 2 costly turnovers. Me not holding the safety, me just knowing the coverage, me knowing it was man. threw a BS interception. It was 7-7 at the time. I believe they scored after that. Battle back, fumble, snap, trying to make something happen. Couldn't throw. It was like a RPO play, so I couldn't really throw the ball to Likely. The offensive line was down the field, so I was trying to make something happen. Tried to squeeze the ball, it slipped out my hand. Von Miller picked it up, got some yards. I think that led to points for them. So it's a team effort out there. He been busting his behind, he making plays happen out down that field for us. Came up short. And like I've been saying all season, every time we in situations like this, turnovers play a factor. Penalties play a factor. Tonight, the turnover, we can't have that and that's why we lost the game. Because as you can see, we're moving the ball wonderfully. It's hold on to the ball. I'm sorry for my language. Annoying. I'm tired of
Feel that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's a instinct, I think, to talk about, because it's going to be annoying, obviously, for the Ravens and frustrating in this aftermath and for their fans and for the next 6 months until we do this again. That's just how it works. But I want to resist the urge to talk about the legacy of it all and the long-term view of it all, because I just have been around enough to see how it just is always changing. Lamar and Peyton Manning, who I think have a lot of similarities just as in terms of their individual career and their success and not playing their best. Like, Lamar really has had some of his worst games in the playoffs. I don't think this was one of them, but he did have the mistakes in the first half of this game that he obviously regrets. But otherwise, we saw what made the Ravens great. But there are a lot of similarities with Manning. I'm old enough to remember that Manning was always the guy who couldn't win the big game. He was always the guy that couldn't win the big game until he wasn't. And then it actually flipped so far that he was the greatest of all time. And it actually was kind of done and dusted at that moment, which is funny to think about now. On NFL.com, the morning of the Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl, it said greatest of all time, how Peyton Manning can cement like his title with one more win over the Seahawks.
And they got skulled
in this game. And they lose 43-8. And it's funny to think about now. Now people make their top fives, and people don't even talk about Manning, which I think they should. Like, he should be in that mix, but it's just stupid. It's all stupid.
It's the same people, Greg.
Yes.
We let them off the hook every single time, whether it's Andy Murray, Phil Mickelson, LeBron James, Michael Jordan. They just say it, and then the person wins, and then they say it about the next person, and we never take the time to mute and block these people and take the microphones out of their damn hands. It doesn't make any sense. You win the game, and then everything is great. But if you don't, there's only two outcomes that can happen. There's only two outcomes that can happen. So the idea, if you don't win, that you can't win, it's asinine. And if you love football, if you love sports, then you should hold people that you communicate with to a higher standard where they don't say dumb that doesn't make any damn sense.
Yes, it's also massively reductive in a team sport. It's 11 on 11. You have to stay healthy. The ball that's not round has to bounce your way. You have elements that you play in, especially in playoff games that are played outside. Some things can go wrong. It's not always down to one player, no matter how important the position is. Yet, because we reduce everything down to the simplest, most easily understandable form for talk shows, which a podcast is a talk show.
Yeah, we are one.
But for airtime on TV on Monday morning, it ends up being that. And then you go to the barbershop or the locker room, and they all say the same things. And guess what? Football is a much more complex sport than that. It is like dance and jazz that's choreographed at a high speed with massive humans all playing at once. And sometimes it's slippery and cold out there. It is not that easy, and it's not that simple.
Yeah, and I like what you said to me, Patrick, before the show. You said something that you don't want the conversations around this game to impact how you feel about the game.
No, about this particular team. Right. Because the 2023-2024 Detroit Lions and Baltimore Ravens were very good football teams with very good and notable stories that should be remembered and celebrated. But because ball bounces and things didn't ultimately go their way, we're forced to relegate them to the back of our minds in history. But they were still very good football teams.
They were very good, but they didn't.
The ultimate result.
They ultimately didn't play their best game, which is what they needed to go through the playoffs. And I do think that's where it's not about legacy. It's about the 2024 Ravens, that this was a really good Ravens teams. They've had some before. I think the way they came into the playoffs, and I think you saw today, their defense wasn't perfect, but I think it was good enough. And I think their offense was special, that it was a missed opportunity. It's a loaded AFC with 3 major superpowers, but they had a real opportunity, and if they had gotten through this game, it would have been really tough next week, and the Super Bowl would have been tough too. But I think I'll think of them a little similar to the 2022 Bills that lost in overtime, or 2021 Bills. It's so hard to this Bills team is always knocking on the door, Eric, but that team, I'll always be convinced, if they had just gotten through that game, I think they would have won the Super Bowl. And this Ravens team was that kind of team, and they didn't get it done. And so that hurts, because we've been around long enough to know they're not going to have that team every year. You know, and Lamar has years left in his prime, but you can't guarantee that they're going to have that good of an offense going into the playoffs. I was going to say healthy, but relatively healthy is the word. I really think they missed Zay Flowers in these last 2 games, and that's just how it goes.
You saw a crosser to Miller
Yes.
today, and it's like, wow, the Miller game. Yeah, it would be nice, but everybody's dealing with injuries, and all credit to a Bills team. Eric's folks, nobody get mad at me. They played great. Good luck against Kansas City.
They did. I think they're such a good team, and they're so diverse that they played their B- game, not a bad game, or a B game, Eric. Is that fair to say? And they won a divisional round game against a really good opponent.
Yeah, and these conversations would have been the exact same thing if Lamar goes down and wins. Then we're talking about Josh Allen never getting over the hump.
Yes.
It was a doomed matchup from the start. The loser is gonna sit and dwell in it for 6 months, whatever it is. And now it's on to KC. It sucks. I would have much rather this been the AFC Championship game, but then we would have been having the same conversation next week instead of right now.
Selfishly, I just wanted 12% more fireworks, or 17% more fireworks. I wanted Andrews to make that catch, and I wanted them to go back and forth in overtime. Or I wanted to see what would happen with Josh Allen with the ball there. I wanted to see what happened with Josh Allen going for it on 4th down there. I wanted to see these 2 great players do even more, but they did plenty. They've entertained us all. Let's go and talk about the NFC. Let's take a quick break after I let you know that you can still donate and support the Red Cross at redcross.org/NFL. The devastation, the destruction from the wildfires in the LA region has died down over the last week, but it also is really becoming a difficult time. We all have people close to us in this city that are starting to rebuild, and just the day-to-day practicalities of now what they're doing, that's where they're going to need help. And some people have more resources than others, certainly, but it's difficult for everyone. And the Red Cross is out there trying to help, and we're worried about this wind event and the heat that it's coming over the next couple of days. So we hope for the best there. But you can help all the families in the Red Cross respond to and help these people recover from these disasters by donating today at redcross.org/NFL. We will be back on the other side, and you will hear from the Philadelphia Eagles radio crew.
It's 4th and 11. If the Eagles stop them right here, if they keep them shy of a 1st down, they win the game. Stafford lines up. He's in the gun. Motion to the near side. Stafford back. He's looking. He puts it in the air, and it's incomplete. It's incomplete. The Eagles take over on downs, and now they are heading for the NFC Championship game. Pressure by Carter.
That was Merrill Reese on WIP. Fitting that the Eagles defense had to finish the game like they did much of the season, with a little help from Saquon Barkley. A lot of help, let's be real. 28-22, the Eagles get it done. Although, when Matthew Stafford hit Puka Nacua down the sideline in the snow, their second drive in just the last couple of minutes that ends up getting close to the end zone. I don't know about you, Shook, but I thought this improbable Rams season was going to continue. I really did.
I said out loud, this is why I don't start writing at length in close games like this until it's over, because they're about to blow up everything I've written so far. And they didn't, but they made it really interesting. What was funny, I think, to me is in the broadcast, Collinsworth with like 3.5 minutes left is like, yeah, they're finally moving the ball. They decided to go up tempo and it's working, but they just went to it too late. Like speaking in the past tense as if the game's over. And I said out loud then, Chris, they got all 3 timeouts and 3.5 minutes left. This game is not over. And it clearly wasn't over.
Although, to be fair to Chris, and I agree with you, Nick, you were right in that scenario. The drive that Stafford put together, the hurry up that he's talking about, after the Saquon Barkley one-play 78-yard drive, which put them up 28-15 with 4.5 minutes to go. First of all, the offense was not plentiful in this game, and you figured it was over. But they went 10 plays in a minute 48. That was some badass gunslinger. Only a couple quarterbacks, veteran quarterbacks, are going to be able to pull that off. That took 3, 4, 5 really nice throws by Matthew Stafford and great decisions. And then he hits that Puka throw. And I'm thinking, that's the Matt Ryan throw to Julio Jones in the Super Bowl, and it kind of will be remembered that way. A great throw that's for naught. But man, Stafford had a great kind of final case. Our friend Jordan Rodriguez got emotional writing this last game of the season for this Rams team, and they put it well in their headline. If the Rams' improbable season had to end, Stafford got a last word in. It was not a perfect game from Stafford, but all the things that you love about him.
He put the fear of God in the link. Not just the ball to Puka, but it was another classic Stafford playoff no look on touchdown to Parkinson, where it's like, don't give 9 the ball back. I mean, the Eagles played most of this game. I think Quinyon Mitchell only got 6 snaps of pass coverage before he left the game hurt, so the Eagles were man down in the secondary, but Jalen Carter was getting pressure all game, and the season-long narrative was, hey, you get to Stafford a few times, the offense is going to slow down, but the Rams' offense, it kept coming. And even though it happened late, as we talked about earlier, these points are cumulative, right? And this Stafford gives the Rams this puncher's chance that really isn't duplicated almost anywhere else. When you look at the guys, of course, Puka and Cooper Kupp provide a thing that not a lot of folks have, but the plays that were made, Demarcus Robinson, right? Great catch, takes the ball away from a defender. He puts these guys in position to make plays where these balls might not even be thrown by a lot of other very, very good quarterbacks. And that's why if this is, right, because we've talked about the potential end of the Stafford era, like to take away this coronation from Tom Brady, to steal that Super Bowl, to ruin the first season of Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, like to come in and be this Baba Yaga, right? Like this man is the John Wick of the NFL. And even when, all the tools might not be available, he could still scare a really good team. The Eagles could win the Super Bowl. They could have also lost tonight. Right.
And their offense has not been good enough passing the ball through 2 games in the playoffs to win a Super Bowl, but they've gotten through these 2 games and they can get better. They actually have 186 net yards passing combined in the 2 games, which is outrageous. They average 2.5 yards per play. And I feel like the preview that we did with Bo Wolf was so Eagles focused, and here we're starting in a similar way where we're going negative Eagles, even though they won the game. But I do want to start at the end and work our way backwards, because the reason the Rams had the ball there, not only is Stafford's great quick drive where they go and hurry up, and yes, the Eagles' decision really all season not to rotate their 4-down linemen. That's just what Fangio does, and for the most part, it's been fantastic. It seemed to catch up on to him late in this game. They were getting tired. The Rams going hurry up, that was a problem. But the bigger problem, Shook, was they need 1 first down to win the game, essentially. It would just about win the game.
Oh, God.
And they get a 4-yard run, I think, from Saquon on first down, and Jalen Hurts is not moving well. He suffers, I believe, a knee injury early in this game. He's in the medical tent for a while. We think we might get Kenny Pickett. It doesn't happen, but he's compromised, and he doesn't do a lot of passing after that. And they call a rollout to his left on second down with the season on the line, and he smartly just gets sacked by Kobe Turner on a play he really had no chance. There was an open receiver. If you look at the dots, like Devonta Smith was open. If Kobe Turner had taken the cheese, Kobe Turner did not take the cheese shook, and we would be talking about the coaching decisions by the Eagles if Stafford had finished out this game there. Wow, that sequence to me drove me crazy.
Yeah, and it was indicative of a game at which one point I described it as Kellen Moore as having a 2023 AFC Championship game Todd Monken day, where like he's just not going to his strength. Like he just actively went away from Saquon for a portion of this game. And yes, it's predictable to hand it off 3 times and you're trying to salt away the game. But also, don't outsmart yourself and get your quarterback out on the move when he clearly hasn't been moving well the entire second half. They're putting deep drops on him in his own end zone. He gets sacked for a safety. Like the play calling in terms of situation and the state of your quarterback and where your strengths lie on a day in which it's snowing like crazy the entire day, and to the point where they have to superimpose the numbers on the field on the TV broadcast because you can't see him in real life. They're still making strange decisions. So you have to like thank the defense for coming away with one last stop to win this game, because yes, it very much could have been a game that they lost in epic fashion. And like Patrick said, the fear of God was in the link because all the Eagles fans felt it happening. As soon as they went 3 and out with that second down play call, they immediately were like, oh God, they're going to get the ball back. We're really going to have to sweat this out all the way to the end. And luckily they came away on top, but man, not without some nervous moments.
Right. That was a minus 12 sack for Kobe Turner. These kids, I shouldn't call them kids. I mean, they're large men. We had some of them on the podcast before the season, including Kobe Turner, but especially Turner and Verse in this game were just awesome. I saw someone comp Verse to Khalil Mack on Twitter today, and I was like, oh, that's kind of perfect. A young Khalil Mack. They win in the same sort of ways. They're just so freaking strong. He made Jordan Mailata like who outweighs him by 100+ pounds. Okay, maybe that's not true, but it looks like it. Maybe it might
closer
be
to 100 than it is 50.
if it's listed that way. Maybe not, but like he made him look small, and he had a monster day with a couple sacks and all these pressures. And then Turner, and they lost Braden Fisk early in this game was definitely a factor. But then so on third down, they give the ball to Saquon. The Rams get the ball back. They have a throw to Cooper Kupp, with probably his last game as a Ram. They have that throw to Puka down the field. But yes, I think after Stafford and the offensive line made a couple mistakes, like Dotson takes a false start to back them up. But then Stafford gets the ball to Puka again to set up a 3rd and 2. Really, the biggest play of the game to me was Jalen Carter's sack, where I don't know if it was a mental error from Bo Limmer, the center.
It.
Okay,
I can explain
please
it to you.
Please do.
Okay, so then I think this is what won the game for the Eagles defensively. Vic Fangio in the second half started deploying these stunts because he realized that Stafford was, trying to push the ball down the field, and what he was doing, like every quarterback does, is he was stepping up into the pocket. And essentially what he created was a lie for Stafford to see. It was a falsehood right in front of him, in which they would stunt the interior guys away, and it would create this space that Stafford thought, okay, I can step up into that. And as soon as he'd step up into the pocket, a guy would come around on the backside of the stunt and drill him from his blind side and sack him. That's why they ran up their sack total and why they got after him in the second half. So on that last drive and in that key spot, they see Jalen Carter there, and what they try to do, at first I thought they were sliding. I went to look at the end zone angle. I realized, oh, they're not sliding. He puts a hand on him, and as he puts a hand on him, he looks to his left because he's anticipating a stunt that never shows up. And Carter does a great job of faking as if he's going to come in, he's going to crash inside, the other guy's going to twist around behind him, but he doesn't twist around behind him because he makes the fake and then goes the opposite direction and leaves Allen completely in the dust and has a free path to the quarterback. I thought it was a great example of how constant stunts can get in the heads of linemen, and in the biggest high-pressure moments, they can force mistakes like that.
And that's a great pass rush move by Jalen Carter. And this game was why you draft a defensive lineman as early as you can when he's as talented as Jalen Carter. There are a lot of teams that wish they took Jalen Carter. Bears fans are probably thinking, man, we could have Jalen Carter and Jared Verse. I know that's wishful thinking. I'm just saying. Like, this game was elite. 6 pressures. He was double teamed on 26 snaps in this game. So most of the snaps that he was out there, he was double teaming. And that was what I thought for a second. Did Limmer think like he was getting help there? Because there weren't many one-on-one passing situations for him. And despite all those double teams, 6 pressures, 2.5 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 5 tackles, a forced fumble, and a pass breakup. So Carter, just a massive performance. He had that punch out on Kyron Williams, which was such a big part of this game. If I had to pick just like a sequence that made the difference in this game, there were a lot of them. It was a really fascinating game, but the back-to-back turnovers that the Eagles offense had. So you had one by Jalen Carter, and then you had the other by Nolan Smith on Matthew Stafford.
To this 3rd and 10. Higby, the tight end, in motion. Eagles are going to be coming. Back goes Stafford. He looks up. He's being chased. He has the ball knocked out of his hands. Eagles have it. Yep. Second turnover. Yep. Knocked out of his hands. And coming up with it, Nolan Smith made the hit. Nolan Smith hit him. And Zach Bond recovered.
Zach Bond was all over the place in this game. And I just thought it was 2 good teams. It wasn't like it was a terrible offensive line performance by the Rams, and Nolan Smith has just improved throughout the course of the season. I thought this game, the guys, without Quinyon Mitchell being there, that you've seen step up in big moments all season for them. Bond with massive plays, Nolan Smith with massive plays, Darius Slay with massive plays, and of course Jalen Carter. Like that, it was kind of the reason that the Eagles got this far, despite not having like a great passing game. Like the defense got it done today.
Yeah, and Isaiah Rodgers stepped up.
Yeah,
and had a huge target on his back and made plays when he needed to make plays. It was such a great way that Shook pointed out how Carter makes that sack play by kind of going Jordan versus Byron Russell, and just, it's the crossover allows the move, but the push feels like it's a push, but he's running over there to catch the stunt anyway. And it's that union, right? Because we talked about this hypothetical Bears defense that they could have all this talent. You still need to put the guys in position to make plays. And I was doubtful of Vic Fangio. I didn't necessarily believe. You made me a believer, Greg, when you talked about this Fangio effect of designing defenses that have had lasting impacts in the league, and to see it work with this particular unit and I know that he came in as the consultant. It didn't work against the Chiefs at all in the Super Bowl. It was a categorical failure across the board, but to see it working, I believe now, because this group, which is very young,
yes.
Like it's a very young group, and they're making plays together, like cohesively, in the way that we see like a Brian Flores defense with guys with like 30 years of combined experience between 3 guys. These guys are all young, and they're doing it.
Yeah, I was thinking there isn't an interior defensive lineman I'd rather have on my team than Jalen Carter. Like he would be the number 1 pick. In terms of, you're talking about like the next 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. And then I was even thinking like, even defensive linemen, you could make an argument that if you were choosing one defensive lineman to have for the next 5 years, Jalen Carter's on that list. You could make different choices if you wanted, but like that's a totally reasonable case. And yeah, they got a bunch of them. They got Quinyon Mitchell. They got Cooper DeJean. I don't think they're going to have Zach Bond unless they want to franchise tag him. That's a conversation for the offseason, because some team like the Patriots or the Titans are going to give him like $35 million a year to just be like stupid money, and I don't know if
good for Zach Bond.
Yes, are going to be willing to pay that money. But as we continue to kind of go backwards in the 4th quarter, the Eagles settled for a field goal after those turnovers. Like the Rams defense, despite giving up a bunch of big plays in this game, I think played really well overall, and they kept holding on and forcing 3 points and getting the ball back for the Rams until they didn't. That was the Saquon 4th quarter run.
22-yard line. That's where Philadelphia opens up. Handoff. It's Barkley running to the left. Barkley gets by everybody. Saquon Barkley is gone. Touchdown. On a snowy Sunday, Saquon Barkley has dominated for the Eagles.
Yes, that was Ian Eagle. Love to have him on the show from Westwood One, and I'd like to apologize to Saquon Barkley. We've made it this far into the proceedings and haven't brought up like the whole reason why the Eagles are in the NFC Championship. Not the whole reason, but like the biggest reason. Let's be real. He had 205 yards in this game on the ground, 27 more through the air. Add that up for me, Shook. That's 232 out of a total of 350 yards were Saquon, and just a magical season. He has 6 plays, 6 touchdowns, over 40 yards this season. 4 of them are against the Rams. Like, poor Chris Shula and this Rams defense are going to be seeing Saquon Barkley long runs in their nightmares all offseason.
Yeah, and it's not really representative of the entire game because other than those 2 long touchdown runs, I think the remaining 65 rushing yards came on his other 24 carries. So math wizards can tell you, I think that's like under 3 yards an attempt, right? So they did a good job at bottling him up, but it was the big plays. And really what it comes down to is the cohesiveness of this entire offense. It's the offensive line getting to second level on that run and catching everybody that was in the box in the wash so that Saquon was never interrupted on that touchdown run. Like, it's the way they all play together so well, and they have such a special athlete and a special back in Saquon that can take it from a big gain to a touchdown run that makes this offense so special. And especially on a day in which they are not throwing the ball well, the elements are not in their favor, they can lean on a guy like that and bust one big open right there down the sideline for a touchdown. It's a magical thing to see happen to a guy who had struggled so much because of the situation he was dealing with in New York. It's like freeing. It's like dreams do come true, guys.
He's ruined other running backs for me. I don't know if you guys do this, but when I watch other games now, I think, Saquon would have housed that one. Like when, it's like like a 20-yard mix and run against the Chiefs or whatever. And I was like, actually, that hole would have been a Saquon touchdown. And no one else other than Saquon is doing that. And yes, you're right. They didn't have a crazy high success rate. It was like 40% today, which is just average. But he had a 62-yard run on a 3-play drive for a touchdown in the first quarter. And Jalen Hurts, in the first drive of the game, had a 44-yard run. So those long rushing plays were so massive. They are a big play rushing offense, and it's the combination of Saquon and Jalen Hurts today and the offensive line. They are like a big play offensive line because it can't be perfect every play, but sometimes with those guys, when it's all lined up, they had that on that Hurts run. Like, Mailata didn't even have anyone to hit. It's just so perfect that it's like a big play. It's like a 70-yard throw, except that's how good this whole offensive line and operation is.
And that's why it's hard to go specifically carry by carry and be like, oh, they did a good job on this play.
Right.
Because it's always there. Like, the big bat is always there, and the ball could leave the park at any time. And I don't know why Derrick Henry's the only back that we say, like, oh, you got to get him early or he's going to be gone, because that applies to 26 as well. And even when you do make those plays, and get to him in the backfield, he's so creative in short space because that ability to pull away is always going to be there, and the explosion, the separation. And I'm so glad that the idea that, if you put a replacement level player in, then he's still going to, no, it's not the same. If somebody's going to get the ball 26 times on the ground, you would like that player to be better than other people. Mm-hmm. He's better than almost everyone.
He really is, and he is the number one reason. It is interesting to think about the economics of the game with all of this, because it's crazy that he's making less money than Dorrance Armstrong, who's had a nice season for the Commanders. I didn't want to pick a guy who was like a free agent bust last year. I actually want to pick someone who I think's had a good season for the money that he made. But Armstrong actually got a better deal overall than Saquon did in the offseason, and he's actually lived up to it. So what is Saquon really worth? He's really worth wide receiver 1 money.
Yeah. It's a clear and easy case. And I think when he and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs were having those offseason conversations, when they all weren't getting the compensation that they were rightfully due, they all knew that ultimately there's nothing they could do for themselves. But hopefully in a few years, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Ashton Genty will have opportunities to actually be properly compensated because these guys have proven if you have a difference maker back there, again, if you're going to give the ball to a particular person, it makes sense that you should invest well in that particular person if you're giving it to them more than anybody else.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Jalen Hurts, who after the game answered a series of questions about the status of his knee. And the headlines coming out of the press conference were that he said he's okay to play next week. But that was after 3 questions. And the final question was whether he's confident he'll play. And he said, yeah. Before that, they also asked him about the injury. And he says, I was able to finish the game. We'll see how the week goes. They asked, does that mean your status is uncertain? He said, great question. No, just seeing how the week goes, seeing how the things will progress. He was limited in this game, Shook, in terms of his movement, but they've been pretty limited in terms of their passing game. Even before he had that injury, he was holding onto the ball a lot and taking sacks and not making great decisions. What is your confidence level with their passing attack going forward on potentially like a compromised Jalen Hurts?
I'm worried about it. I mean, his average time to throw tonight was actually only 2.81 seconds, which is way lower than it usually is.
Yeah, but that's because it doesn't count the sacks. Like those sacks,
it's also
right? Those sack plays, I feel like we're an average of like 5 seconds for those sacks.
Yeah, and the problem is he can hang on to the ball and extend the play and make plays when he can move. When he can't move, that all falls apart and breaks down, which puts more of the onus on Saquon to rip off a few big plays to keep this offense afloat. So that's what I'm concerned about. I don't know if I evaluate the passing effectiveness today, with by the same scale as some other games, because the conditions were bad and the flow of the game just didn't really call for it necessarily. Like if you put him in a dome, is he completing more passes to AJ Brown? AJ Brown had like 2 drops. He snapped a streak of a ton of games in which he hadn't gone with a drop, and he had a couple of drops. So like it was tough to catch the football. So they'll probably be better if the conditions are better. But overall, this passing game hasn't been great for a while. None of us should be very surprised by that. It's just that we should be more concerned if he can't move, and they're going to go out there and take the same approach. And oh, by the way, go away from Saquon for periods of the game inexplicably. They can't do that. They have to learn from this game.
Yeah, and he's just got to get. And I know like you want people to get rid of the ball quicker, but there's moments where we've seen Jalen Hurts make those throws. The safety play, it was a delayed route by Dallas Goedert where the pressure gets to him in 3 seconds, but there was an option to throw the ball from his end zone. Right, this isn't like where Lamar was explaining. He gets an RPO. There's nobody in the middle of the field.
Right,
like everybody's running to the sidelines. He has to make a play. No, Jalen Hurts had an option there. For some reason, he just stared it down. He did that like 4 or 5 times today, and you don't want to speculate and look back to the concussion a few weeks ago, but there were opportunities for him to get rid of the ball where he just didn't.
Yeah, let's listen to that play from our friend JB Long. Miss this guy.
Second down and 6:08. 35 seconds left in the third quarter. Play clock at 2. Hurts calls for the snap. Rams coming after him with 4. From his end zone. Pressure's there. They got him. It's a safety to bring the Rams within 1. Neville Gallimore got there first with the flex. The defense does it again.
Shout out to JB. Shout out to Neville Gallimore. Nice pass rush. Nice performance actually down the stretch as a kind of a situational pass rusher for them. But that outstanding point there by Patrick, because I think you got to be able to throw over the middle of the field and throw with anticipation to be a top 10 quarterback, to be on QB Island. And that's a play where I think a veteran quarterback knows where his guys are, and they throw that pass with anticipation, that they know Goddard's going to be there, and they get to that read a little quicker, or they throw it before he's out of his break. And there were a lot of plays like that. He took 7 sacks in this game, and he just hasn't looked confident with what he's seen. And I don't know what the fault of that is, but it's a big problem. I really think it's going to be a big problem for them. Now the Commanders are, a different matchup, maybe not as good of a pass rush, but when you look at the numbers, the Rams actually didn't have that many quick pressures on the day.
No.
Only 4, which is under 2.5 seconds, which is crazy. And so a lot of it was Hurts holding the ball. I do like that from what I saw after the game, Hurts was in a celebratory mood, joking a little bit. Maybe it was a little bit of relief. He's always just so serious. I don't know. Maybe that speaks to me that maybe he's not as hurt, hopefully. Like he was enjoying the moment. I expected like a dour Jalen Hurts after that performance. And actually he seemed like appropriately enjoying that they just won a playoff game and are 1 game away from the Super Bowl.
Maybe his biggest smile I've seen was the cutaway after Saquon goes on that 76-yard touchdown run with Jalen just beaming. Now, of course, things got rife with terror after that when Stafford went into Grim Reaper mode. But still, they're going to have an opportunity to play next week against a team that's given them some problems.
Yeah, and it's funny because it wasn't all on Hurts at all offensively. They got the job done in the end, but you mentioned the Hurts drops. Shook, one just killed a drive. It was on maybe Hurts' best throw. Actually, both drops that A.J. Brown had were on very good throws by Hurts. The deep ball where maybe that's on the snow. And this was a ultimate snow referendum game. We'll talk about that in a second. But like that was a dime. Like how different is this game if Brown just catches that ball? And I think they would have been up 20-7 at the time, maybe going into half up 20-7. Like, and his numbers would be totally different. It'd be a different game. And actually, the second drive of the game, he had a nice anticipatory throw on second down where he did kind of make the read that Patrick and I are asking for, and A.J. Brown kind of alligator armed it. And then the offensive line, which has been good all year, obviously fell short in a couple big moments. Mekhi Becton had a mental error on a couple plays, a blown block, a penalty, and then Lane Johnson moves when they're 3rd and inches on the goal line. If Lane Johnson doesn't flinch there, that's another 4 points. Like, They made a lot of errors that usually get you beat, Shooky.
Yeah, and we're overlooking them because they had the explosive plays for touchdowns. When Lane Johnson flinched, his butt came up in the air, and I thought he was actually trying to dig his feet in for more leverage on first view, and then I saw the replay and I was like, oh no, he just false started. He clearly he false started so bad that when they actually snapped the ball, he didn't move for a half second. Then he's like, oh, we are playing the play. Yeah, they made the mistakes. Like Mekhi Becton's illegal man downfield wiped out a great screenplay that would have set them up for a great scoring opportunity. And I came away from those two takeaways in the second half where they only got field goals out of both of them. I'm like, oh, you're going to regret that. You really should have cashed at least one of those in for a touchdown. But in the grand scheme of this entire game, when you count all those mistakes and everything, you look at it now and you're like, okay, well, they still won the game. They definitely have things to iron out offensively. And the matchup next week is very different from this one. But luckily, they have a week to prepare.
Great teams have multiple ways to win games, and they have a chance to be a great team. And I'm glad we talked this through because I thought the Rams were going to win after that Puka catch, just because I've seen so many games like this where the team that in theory should have won makes all the sort of mistakes that the Eagles make, and then they end up losing the game. But it didn't happen that way. And that's happened a couple times for the Eagles this year, frankly, where the defense just kind of bails them out.
Yeah, like we saw in the AFC divisional game on Sunday, right? The Eagles made those mistakes, and that's how small, again, those margins can be, going back to that A.J. Brown drop, right? Because Jalen goes through his reads perfectly. He holds Cam Curl in the middle of the field. Dallas Goedert threatens. Jalen throws a great ball, but you don't execute at the catch point. Something A.J. Brown is one of the absolute best in the NFL at. Puka had a drop today. It's
well, yeah. The ball was slick. Okay, let's talk about the weather. I was not a fan of the weather in this game.
Spoken like somebody who's lived in LA for a long time.
No, it's spoken by someone who likes the biggest football games to ultimately be decided. I'm of two minds. I do kind of like it, but this was too far. Like the Bills game, it didn't feel like it affected as much, although there were some slippery passes. Like some of the biggest plays in this game, Matthew Stafford just drops the ball while handing it off. We're getting drop after drop by A.J. Brown and Puka Nacua in big situations. Stafford, the ball seemed to slip out of his hands. I mean, we know this guy's built for it. He's played well in elements before, but it's just the ball slippery. Like Hurts misses one of his throws by 20 feet. Even that last throw by Stafford, I don't even know. I don't want to think that the elements had this big of a factor. Before I get your thoughts on this, let's listen to Sean McVay after the game talking about the elements.
I think you saw, there was some times where some uncharacteristic things just in terms of the ball handling. We had 2 turnovers that probably don't necessarily occur in different elements, a couple drops. You could see, when Saquon got to the second level, similar to the first game, but there was some different layers that we did have in our defense. He was able to pull away, but, they had to play in it too. We had to play in it. We had every opportunity to be able to win that game at the end there, Sarah, and we're a couple plays away from me being a lot happier right now.
Good perspective. Shuck, what do you think about the whole weather discussion?
Well, I'm a throwback, and as a former offensive lineman who loves to run block, I love the elements, baby. Let's muck it up. Let's make it dirty. Let's make it nasty. Let's go win in the trenches. And by the way, Landon Dickerson had an awesome game today. He was throwing pancakes left and right, just decking guys into the snow. It was the beauty and the essence of football at its core. But I also thought it was an interesting test of a kicker in Jake Elliott, who's been very up and down this season, very inconsistent, misses an extra point earlier before the elements really set in. And then they're clearing snow for him like it's Adam Vinatieri against the Raiders in the playoffs in 2001, just for him to make a kick. And he drills 2 clutch kicks amid the snow. Yep. So I think it's a test of both sides of the game. I think that you can find greatness in guys who are able to overcome it. It's also a convenient excuse when guys drop passes, but I think it is the ultimate. It levels the playing field, I think, sometimes.
Right, it levels it. I agree it does probably level it because it just adds more randomness and luck to the proceedings. But I'm glad you mentioned Jake Elliott coming up big in a big spot. Justin Tucker hit a big kick in a big spot in a tough situation. So shout out to some great kickers over the years who had bad years who stepped up in the playoffs. Your thoughts, Patrick? Let me just give you a Josh Sweat quote before I do that. This was Josh Sweat's comment on the field in the situation. He said, y'all just see me cleaning my damn cleat every step. I'd rather play on that Brazil field again before playing on that again. That field was ass. Thank you, Josh Sweat.
That's your own crew. Like that's your own, field management team, grounds crew.
What can they do? Wait, it also was going from like hail to wintry mix to heavier snow. It was a lot to deal with.
Yeah, it's nasty. And I've said it where we've had some quick change, like playoff, postseason, college football games at State Farm Stadium where they get a new field in there. I saw Oregon and Auburn play where Cam Newton had that Heisman season where he could do anything. They were playing in mud. I was down there shooting the game. It was like 6 inches of mud. It didn't add to the experience at all. And I understand if folks like the elements, they like it aesthetically. The only beef that I have is the idea that, like, because I liked the game between the Lions and the Commanders and they determined it on the field, right? That, like, the air conditioner didn't fall on anybody and I could see the whole game. It doesn't make me less tough,
right,
or whatever. I just I like to see people have full use of all 10 of their fingers. I don't want to see Saquon running to the sideline because he took a helmet straight to the bone in cold weather, and I'm sure it sent like shockwaves through his entire body. I would like to see guys being able to execute, and it's frustrating to watch an entire season of football and guys managing injuries and all of this, and then it kind of come down to randomness, which is always going to be play. I would just prefer not to have it.
And it's adding a different X factor that isn't always there the rest of the season. And my thing is, people like to say, well, that's football weather. It's football weather. All right. Show me all your 5-star recruits that are coming out of Buffalo and Massachusetts. No. Football is played at the highest of levels in Texas and Louisiana and Florida. And I know you got some people out there in Ohio, Shooky. It's football weather there. But if you're just counting up the numbers between the warm weather states, California, all of them, like, the best football and the best football players are coming from where the weather's better because it's more favorable to football.
The states that devote more resources to football have
there you go. There you go. The higher population, more tax dollars.
Nobody's getting magical powers due to their place of birth.
Okay, that's a good
point. I'll tell you what, I sunbathed a lot as a kid, and that made me a great receiver.
California quarterback that won for the Buffalo Bills today didn't acquire snow powers. He's been there.
Okay, you win. Point for
like college ball in Wyoming.
Point for Patrick.
In the dome.
My point is, It's football weather in Florida. It's football weather in Georgia. It's football weather in Louisiana. It's football weather anywhere that football is played.
There
It's
it is.
not more football weather where it's cold when you can't tell me.
Oh, wait, you know what?
Like it's
Let
not
me get you
football
the
weather
opposite
in
of this.
Texas.
Okay.
Let's get the opposite of this. How do you feel about it when it's 100 degrees out and players are roasting in the sun in Miami in September? Because that's also the elements on the opposite end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't love that either.
No, I don't want.
But there's
to
not
see
a lot
heat
of that.
stroke.
There's not a lot of that. That's the thing. Is all those teams for the most part played in domes other than Miami.
Yeah, I will take 72
overhang.
with a breeze coming from the vents. I'll take that all day. If that makes me, whatever, that's me. I'll watch it.
Optimal conditions.
I'm glad you brought it. Yeah, optimal condition, because it doesn't have to be about the weather. There will be Eagles fans and players that will hold till their deathbed that they lost that Super Bowl to the Chiefs in part because the field, both
that
teams
field was bad.
both teams had to play on it, and so that wasn't bad weather, but that was bad conditions, and I just don't like the conditions having such an impact. And those conditions, I think, had an impact in the Eagles-Chiefs. It hurt the Chiefs pass rush too. It's not like it just hurt the Eagles. But that's all I mean is I want it to be decided by the excellence of the players.
I think back to the Broncos-Panthers Super Bowl, right, where you have tackles sliding 6 and 7 feet. It's easier for people to understand when it's the field conditions because I don't think anybody likes that. And so if you could take that, if you disagree with me and Greg about snow and extrapolate that to the whole kind of dome aspect of the game, like totally, I think you start to understand where we're coming from.
Okay, so before we move on, we're not going to preview next week, but I do just want to have a little thought on these teams that lost today. What do you think, Ravens-wise, is their biggest off-season push? Like, question, worry. It's funny. They are a team that always feels like they're in pretty good shape. But what do you think?
The offensive line got better as the year went on. People thought Zach Orr was a mistake. Since week 11, they have the best defense in football. As long as 8 is upright, you're going to have an opportunity. And they can get better at corner. They can get some more depth at receiver where everything isn't relying on Rashad Bateman. You mentioned Cooper Kupp. Coop, what's up?
That would be such a Ravens signing if the Rams do cut him. And yeah, that's a good segue. I think it's fair to say the following Rams are not guaranteed to be back.
Uh-oh.
Cooper Kupp. Be a little surprising if he was back. Tyler Higbee. Rob Havenstein because of the contract. And then Matthew Stafford. Let's actually listen to Stafford after the game. I believe this question came from our very own Jordan Rodriguez.
To get to this point, anytime you play like this and get into the playoffs, get a win and keep it moving, it's anytime you come up short, it's even tougher, and so that's difficult. But so proud to be associated with this group, and as far as my future goes, I mean, it's 30 minutes after the last game, so I'll take some time to think about it, but I feel like I was playing some pretty good ball.
You got football left in you?
Sure feels like it.
I think that's pretty close to definitive on whether Matthew Stafford will be playing football again, Shook. I happened to listen to the post game. JB Long did such a good job wrapping up this Rams season. The Rams are really lucky to have him. And then they threw to kind of more like the local post game show that's not officially from the team or anything. And they're talking about Stafford as if most likely him and Kupp are gone. And I don't know. Are you sure you want to do that, Rams? Are you sure? I don't know.
Yeah. That's the thing is, what's your backup plan? Is Jimmy Garoppolo your backup plan? Like, are you going to get in the market when? That's what I'm saying. Like, they don't have a clear succession plan here because that guy doesn't exist on that roster. So, in the name of salary cap and the way the contract is structured, you're just going to part with him when he's still playing football good enough to nearly lead you back to a divisional round win on the road in the snow. Like, it just feels like it's a little too business-minded for me without considering the football aspect of it. And also, if he became a free agent, I could count 5 or 6 teams right now that would be like, let's go sign him immediately. Like, fly him in. He's our guy for the next 2 to 3 years because he can still play football well. Yeah, he was up and down. We've talked about this at length. He's been the hardest quarterback to pin down this year. Very volatile in performance. But when the lights shine the brightest, he came through in 2 games. Yeah, he lost one of them, but he still played much like the Stafford we knew. And I think that's worth something when he still has a desire to play football.
Yes, and as Chris Rose and Daniel Jeremiah walk by after doing the NFL Network show, that's a sign that we should be almost done. We've been honking for a while. I think that's well said, and I think it's important for them to realize they have one of the best young cores in the NFL, especially if they can have another good draft. They've had 2 great drafts in a row that's really helped their lines. Puka Nacua, a true number 1, still on a rookie contract. So it can kind of flip in reverse that you want to take advantage of all these great young players on a rookie contract, and you don't want to waste a year with unless you really love a Sam Darnold or like a 3rd round pick or maybe a 1st round pick. We'll see. The way they structured Stafford's contract, they would save a lot by post June 1st cutting him, and they would absolutely find a trade market, which is much more likely, and save like a little bit of money by trading him, and then they could use that to refill the position. I don't know.
But why?
Right. Why not draft?
Why do all those machinations when you have that young core that you talked about where you'll be like, oh, we're a quarterback away. Well, why send him out of the door?
Yeah. And how far removed are we from the whole talk of Sean McVay walking away to a broadcast job? Like, let's go win now while he's here.
Well, fair. That's a good point. He seems very in it, as they would like to say, where their feet are, and he seems very motivated, and that's not a question for them, but that's a great point. Like, why not try to win it? You better have a good plan if you thought you're going to get rid of him. I came into the season thinking kind of like, all right, well, that's just to be continued. Like, decide based on the evidence that you get during the season. And I think based on that evidence, I would keep Matthew Stafford and start drafting quarterbacks, either in the 1st or the 2nd or even the 3rd. Just give it a shot. Use one of those picks. Do something. A pleasure, guys, on this day. Some other news out there. Sam Cosmi, the Pro Bowl guard for the Commanders, is out for the season. That's something to keep in mind as we look ahead to the NFC Championship game. Unfortunately, suffered a torn ACL. Jeff Ulbrich of Jets interim head coaching fame.
He's free.
He's not free. He got a job.
That's what I'm saying. He's out.
Yes, he got the Falcons defensive coordinator job. So the wheel keeps turning. Our wheel will continue on Tuesday when we get Jordan Rodriguez back in the studio with Colleen Wolfe. But you two, these Sunday nights have been a treat, and we have one more to get to before the Super Bowl. Fun Sunday, fun weekend. I think the divisional round you delivered in a way that the wild card round for me did not. And we've reached the end of the road when there's only 3 games left in this NFL season. Football is back.